The rope creaked. Not in some fancy literary way. It creaked in that real, gut-turning, skin-prickling way that only comes from sun-dried hemp tightening under a boy's weight. Ellie Harrow stood frozen in the street dust of Dust Rock, Arizona. The sound of the townsfolk murmuring behind her was like a distant, angry river. Up ahead on a makeshift gallows, a boy stood on an overturned whiskey crate. He was Apache, no older than 14. His lips were bloodied, his eyes swollen shut, but he wasn't blinking. He was just staring. Marshal Silas Boone adjusted the knot. He did it with the kind of expertise that tells you he's done this 100 times before. "Horse thief," Boone declared, his voice booming with a practiced authority. "Caught red-handed behind Morrison's barn, bold as sin, and twice as stupid." Ellie's fists clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. This wasn't justice. This was a show. "What about a trial?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she took a step forward. "Has anyone even heard his side of the story?" The crowd went quiet. Then the whispers started. Sharp. Angry. "Or are you planning to kill a child without even bothering to ask his name?" Head swiveled. Eyes narrowed. Marshal Boone did not like being interrupted, especially not by a woman he didn't know. He turned to her, slow, deliberate, like he was deciding whether to swat her like a fly. "Lady," he said, drawing the word out like a threat. "You must be new around here." "I'm Ellie Harrow," she said, her voice steady. "My brother Caleb works at the Blackthorn mine." "Then I'd suggest you keep to family business," Boone growled, "and let a lawman handle the law." A loud, ugly laugh came from the saloon porch. A drunk started clapping, slow and mocking. Someone spat in the dust near her feet. Ellie didn't move. She held her ground. And the boy on the crate, for the first time, looked right at her. He didn't plead. He didn't cry. He just looked at her like a man who had already made his peace with dying. And then the rope snapped. It didn't break because of a miracle. It broke because some fool had reused a frayed line soaked in whiskey from the last hanging. The boy dropped like a sack of corn. He hit the ground hard and didn't move. The crowd gasped. A woman crossed herself. Boone cursed under his breath, his face turning a dark shade of red. "Drag him back to the jail," he barked at his deputies. "We'll try again tomorrow, with a proper rope." The spell was broken. The crowd started to drift away like smoke in the wind, but Ellie didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the edge of the street, to the long shadows stretching from Dr. Amos Thorne's clinic. The doctor was standing in his doorway, polishing his glasses, his face pale as a sheet. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest," he muttered as she walked over. "That boy isn't the only one being watched in this town." "I didn't come here looking for trouble," Ellie said, her jaw tight. "I came for the truth." Amos just raised an eyebrow. "Then you're already in more danger than you know." That night, the streets of Dust Rock were dead quiet. The only sounds were the distant jangle of spurs and the rustle of curtains being drawn shut. Ellie was helping Amos pack medicine boxes into his wagon for the morning rounds. The desert heat still clung to the air, making her dress stick to her back. She didn't see him coming. Not until the air shifted. A strong arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet like she weighed nothing. A rough, calloused hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. She kicked, she thrashed, she bit down hard, tasting sweat and dirt. "Quiet," a voice ordered. It wasn't harsh. It was calm, measured, and it had an accent she recognized. Apache. He hoisted her onto a horse like she was a sack of flour. Shouts erupted behind them. "Marshal Boone! She's being taken!" But it was too late. They were already gone, disappearing into the darkness. The horse moved like lightning, its hooves pounding a frantic rhythm against the hard-packed earth. "I'll kill you!" she spat. The second his hand slipped from her mouth. "You think you can just—" "I think," he said, his voice low and steady over the rushing wind. "That if I don't take you now, 3 children will die, and your brother's blood won't be far behind theirs." That shut her up. They rode hard, past the dry creek bed and into the Badlands. The moon hung low in the sky, a silver coin ready to be spent. They didn't stop until the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The canyon they entered was narrow, hidden away between giant slabs of red rock. When they finally dismounted, Ellie shoved away from him, stumbling backward. "What do you want from me?" He took off his hat. Long black hair fell past his shoulders. His eyes were dark, impossible to read. Around his neck hung a piece of carved bone, worn smooth. "I want your attention, Miss Harrow." "Well, you've got it," she hissed. "Who are you?" "I am called Nantan," he said. "And your brother Caleb. He gave the route to the wagon train that was ambushed 2 weeks ago." Ellie just stared, her breath caught in her throat. "That's a lie." Nantan didn't argue. He just reached into his coat and pulled out a scrap of red fabric. It was torn and stained with something dark. She recognized it instantly. It was from the shirt she'd mended for Caleb just last spring. "I found this near the bodies," he said, his voice flat. "And if you stay with me, I will show you what else I found." Ellie didn't say a word. She couldn't. She just stood there, her heart pounding a wild rhythm against her ribs, watching the sun burn the edge of the world orange. "If you want to save those children," Nantan said, his voice low and steady, "you're going to have to face what your brother has become." The fire had burned down to a nest of glowing orange coals. The silence that followed Nantan's words was heavy, clinging to Ellie like the desert heat. She sat in the dirt, her arms wrapped around herself, her dress streaked with grime from the ride. He hadn't tied her up. He hadn't even touched her since they'd dismounted, and that somehow was more terrifying than if he had. It meant he wasn't afraid of her running, or worse, it meant he knew she wouldn't. That scrap of fabric lay between them like an accusation. She remembered tracing that pattern with her fingers back in Missouri, the day Caleb left for Arizona. She'd mended a tear on the shoulder herself. "You could have planted that," she said, but her voice was dry, weak. Nantan's expression didn't change. "You're not a stupid woman. Don't start acting like one now." She bit the inside of her cheek. He was right. There was something about the crooked stitch line, the one she'd sewn. It was real. Her heart knew it, even if her mind refused to accept it. "How do you know it was Caleb?" "I saw him," Nantan said simply. 2 nights before the attack. He was at a trading post near Blackthorn's Ridge talking to a man named Rattles McKinnon. Ellie's blood ran cold. She knew that name, Jed Rattles McKinnon, a gun for hire, a man who worked for Cyrus Blackthorn's private security force. "He was being threatened," she offered, a desperate attempt to find another explanation. "Forced into it." "Maybe," Nantan said. "But 3 Apache children were taken in that same raid. I believe your brother helped make it happen." Her stomach churned. "Then why take me? If this is about Caleb, go to him." "You think abducting a woman is going to solve anything?" "No," Nantan replied, his gaze unwavering. "But you're the only one who can make people listen. The law in Dust Rock won't hear it from me, not from an Apache, but a white woman, the sister of a mining supervisor." "That's a different story." She shook her head, feeling a wave of dizziness. "I don't know who you think I am." "I think," Nantan interrupted, his voice cutting through her denial, "you're someone who doesn't run from the truth, even when it cuts you to the bone." That silenced her again. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the night air. Somewhere in the canyon, a coyote howled. He pulled a piece of charcoal from his satchel and began to draw a rough map in the dirt. Mountains, mines, river trails. "They moved the children north," he said, his finger tracing a line towards a place marked Silver Hollow. "That mine has a dozen abandoned shafts. Some are collapsed, some aren't. If Blackthorn wants to hide them or get rid of them, it's the perfect place. Ellie stared at the crude map. Why? Why would he do this? Because he wants the land, Nantan said, his voice hardening. The land around our sacred sites is rich in silver. He needs an excuse to push my people off. And what better reason than retaliation for a brutal attack? Ellie's fingers dug into the dirt. It was too much. Her brother, a kidnapper. Children used as pawns. A powerful man like Blackthorn pulling the strings of a secret war. And Marshal Boone? Boone's wife and son were killed in a raid near Red Mesa 20 years ago, Nantan said, his eyes darkening. He blames my people for it. But you said it wasn't the Apache. I believe it wasn't. The raid had all the signs of a staged attack, just like the wagon train, the patterns of the bullets. The fire started with lamp oil, not flaming arrows. It's always the same. The Apache get blamed, and Blackthorn expands his territory. Ellie let out a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling, so she shoved them under her legs to hide it. If what he was saying was true, this wasn't just about Caleb. It was about a war built on a foundation of lies. She stood up, brushing the dust from her skirt. What do you need from me? Nantan looked up at her, his face a mask. Testimony. A witness. Leverage. I'm not a weapon. No, he said. You're a key. They broke camp at dawn. The canyon opened up behind them as they rode out, the air crisp and cold. Ellie was quiet, her mind racing. She thought of Caleb's laugh, his letters home filled with promises of a better life. As they neared a cluster of redstone outcroppings, Nantan reined in his horse. Wait here! He dismounted and approached a crevice in the rock. A soft whistle echoed through the canyon. A moment later, a woman emerged from the shadows. She was tall, with long black hair braided with blue thread. Her face was as hard and beautiful as the stone around her. This is Maria Estrella, Nantan said. She teaches the children in Dust Rock, one of the few who hasn't been bought by Blackthorn. Maria studied Ellie for a long, silent moment, then gave a single sharp nod. I've seen your brother, she said, her voice clear and strong. More than once. He looked scared, Miss Harrow, but he was meeting with Blackthorn's men, repeatedly. Ellie's throat tightened. Do you know where he is now? Maria hesitated. He hasn't been back to town in a week, but I believe he left something behind, something you need to see. Together they made their way down into a dry basin. Hidden beneath the loose floorboards of an old trapper's shack was a rusted lockbox. Maria handed Ellie a key, Caleb's old army tag, sharpened into a crude pick. Inside the box was a notebook. Half of it was burned, the pages brittle and singed. Ellie flipped through it, her heart pounding. Mining schedules, payment logs, and then scrawled in Caleb's frantic handwriting, children moved to Hollow, guarded, no way out if it's sealed. Rattles says Cyrus wants them gone before end of month. I didn't sign up for this. Ellie clutched the book to her chest. Her brother wasn't innocent, but he wasn't completely lost either. He tried to warn someone, she murmured. Not loudly enough, Maria said, her voice grim. We have maybe 2 days before those children disappear for good. Ellie looked at Nantan, a new fire in her eyes. Then let's find them. Nantan nodded, his expression grim. There's one place we can start. El Serpiente Gulch. Rattles McKinnon uses it for his supply wagons. If anyone knows exactly where those children are, it's him. Ellie swung herself back onto her horse, the fear in her chest now burning as hot as rage. They set off toward the gulch, the sun rising hard and bright at their backs. The truth was out there, and she was going to drag it, kicking and screaming into the light. Night in Dust Rock didn't just fall, it dropped like a trap door. From a low ridge, Ellie watched the town below flicker to life with the soft glow of oil lamps. It looked so peaceful from a distance. A perfect little lie. She knew better now. She knew that behind every shuttered window, secrets were festering. Nantan handed her a small, curved blade. "For show," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Hide it in your boot. If something goes wrong, don't hesitate." She took it without a word. Her hands had stopped trembling. She didn't know if it was resolve or just numbness, but either way, something inside her had hardened. Maria crouched beside them, a dark riding coat hiding her slight frame. "We only have one shot at this," she whispered. "You slip into Caleb's old room, look for the original maps he mentioned in the notebook. I'll stall Dr. Thorne. He's not a bad man, but his walls have ears." "What about the marshal?" Ellie asked. "Boone won't be at his station," Maria replied. "He drinks alone these days. Blackthorn likes to keep him on a short leash." Nantan stayed behind with the horses, a silent guardian watching the roads. Ellie and Maria crept down into the town, splitting off near the back of the clinic. The air in the hallway smelled of rubbing alcohol and decay. Caleb had lived in the back apartment just long enough to accumulate a drawer full of unpaid bills and broken dreams. She moved like a ghost, sliding open drawers, rifling through ledgers, checking for loose floorboards. Nothing. Until she found it. A simple shoebox, tucked away behind the bed frame. The lid came off with a soft whisper. Inside was a stack of half-burned pages. One page, written in Caleb's panicked scrawl, made her blood run cold. "They're not just moving silver. He's moving bodies. Saw the kids. One tried to run. Rattles said orders were clear. Hollow must be sealed by Sunday." She froze. Footsteps, not Maria's, heavier, slower, echoing down the front hall. Ellie shoved the pages into her satchel and scrambled toward the window. She risked a glance back. A shadow fell across the open doorway. Tall, wide-brimmed hat. A badge glinting in the dim light. Marshal Silas Boone. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't see her. He stepped into the room, his eyes scanning every corner. Then he sniffed the air like a wolf catching a scent on the wind. "Been a while, Harrow," he said, his voice soft but heavy as a tombstone. Her spine went rigid. He knew she was here. "I don't know what you think you're doing, miss," he said, his voice getting closer as he walked toward the window. "But if you're digging up ghosts, you better be damn sure you know who's buried where." She slipped out the window just as he reached for the curtain. Her breath didn't return until she and Maria were back on the ridge, the town a collection of flickering lights below. Back at their makeshift camp, Nantan spread the singed pages across a blanket. He read them in silence, his jaw tight. "This confirms it," he said, his voice grim. "The children are being held at Silver Hollow. They're going to collapse the entrance by Sunday. That's less than 2 days from now." "And Caleb knew," Ellie said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "He tried to warn someone." "Or maybe he was just trying to save his own skin," Maria countered, her tone sharp. "He was seen with Rattles McKinnon. That man doesn't give second chances. If Caleb got cold feet, he's either dead or in hiding." Ellie's eyes burned. She wanted to scream, to rage, to tear the truth out of the very ground. But there was no time for grief, only action. "We go to Silver Hollow," Nantan said, his voice pulling her back from the edge. "But not through the main entrance. We go through El Serpiente Gulch. It's a narrow, dangerous canyon, but it follows the old mule paths. It's where Rattles moves his men." Ellie nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then that's where we hit him." "And if he's armed?" Maria asked, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. "Then we pray he talks before he shoots." They packed in silence, the fire casting long, dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Before dawn, they rode out, heading southeast towards the winding cuts of the gulch. The sky above was a bruised purple, the stars fading one by one. Ellie sat stiff in her saddle, the cold wind slicing at her cheeks. Her thoughts circled the same terrible truth over and over. Caleb knew. Caleb saw them. And Caleb wrote it down, hoping someone would find it before it was too late. They reached the edge of the gulch by mid-morning. The canyon walls rose steep and jagged around them. The air was dry, still, and heavy with a sense of foreboding. Maria held up a hand. Dust. Hoofbeats. Nantan slid from his horse and crept to the edge of the bluff. Below, a small convoy snaked through the narrow path. 3 riders and a covered wagon. And at the front, slouched in his saddle like a man who owned the world, was Rattles McKinnon. "Is that him?" Ellie whispered. Nantan nodded, his eyes like chips of flint. "That's the devil who smiles when children cry." They moved fast, setting up on both sides of the path. The ambush was short and brutal. A single gunshot cracked the silence. The wagon lurched to a halt. Horses reared and screamed. When the dust settled, 2 of the riders were down, and Rattles was pinned under his fallen horse, alive, bleeding, and swearing a blue streak at the sky. Ellie stood over him, her pistol drawn and steady. "You know who I am." Rattles coughed, spitting a mixture of blood and dust. "Sister of the canary who sang too late." "Where are the children?" she demanded, her voice cold as steel. He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. His teeth were stained red. "Ain't no kids anymore, just noise in a hole, and when Cyrus gives the word, that hole gets shut for good." Nantan shoved the barrel of his rifle against Rattles's temple. "Talk!" Rattles sneered. "Silver Hollow, but it's rigged, all of it. You go in, you better have a way out, because once that fuse is lit—" He whistled through his teeth, a chilling imitation of an explosion. Ellie stared down at him, her heart a hammer in her chest. This was it. The last chance. She looked at Nantan. "We're going in." He nodded, his eyes blazing. "We ride now." They left Rattles bound and gagged under a bluff with Maria standing guard. The mine wasn't far. Ellie kicked her horse into a gallop. For the first time, she wasn't riding toward Caleb. She was riding toward the children, and she would tear down the whole damn world to get them back. They reached Red Mesa just as the sun began to bleed across the horizon. As they climbed the narrow switchback trail, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of cedar smoke and dry sage. Ellie felt a stillness settle over her, deep and heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The crimson cliffs rose around them, ancient and silent. This place held ghosts. When they reached the plateau, a weathered tent stood near a ring of stones. An old man sat by the fire, his skin like tree bark, his eyes clouded with white. "This is Blind Bear," Nantan said, his voice softer now. "He remembers what Dust Rock has forgotten." Blind Bear nodded as if he'd been expecting her. "You carry death on your breath, girl," he said, his voice a low rasp. "But not your own." Ellie sat by the fire, the dust of Serpiente Gulch still clinging to her clothes. "I need to understand," she said, "about the raids, the mine, what Blackthorn is really after." Blind Bear stirred the embers. "Long before your people came," he began, "this land spoke. It gave us silver, but it also demanded balance. You take too much, it punishes you. That is why the caves are sacred. We do not dig into the bones of our mother." His blind eyes seemed to see right through her. 20 winters ago there was a raid. Not by my people. By men hired to wear our colors. They slaughtered settlers, leaving behind arrows carved from pine. An Apache would never waste good stone on a fake. It was a lie, built to grow another lie. Ellie's heart pounded a slow, heavy rhythm. The pattern was becoming terrifyingly clear. Blackthorn hadn't just profited from the violence, he had orchestrated it. "And Marshal Boone?" she asked. "Lost his wife and child in that raid," Nantan answered, his voice grim. "He believes we did it, and Blackthorn has kept him angry and blind ever since." "What if I told him the truth?" "He would not hear it," Blind Bear said. "Not from you, not yet." The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the red stone. Nantan tossed a small leather pouch into Ellie's lap. Inside was a folded page, brittle and yellowed with age, The handwriting was precise, chillingly professional. Shipment, 2 carts, silver cover. Target, settler caravan. Clean up after. Burn everything. Use Apache marks. Nothing traceable. Leave no survivors. And at the bottom, a signature. J. McKinnon. Ellie felt the blood drain from her face. It was real. Orders for a massacre. Her brother had walked straight into a legacy of blood. "How many others know?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Too few," Nantan said, "but this might be enough." "We bring this to Boone," she said, her voice filled with a new hard-edged resolve. Nantan shook his head. "We bring it to the children first. Get them out alive. Then we show the town what kind of monster they've been protecting." Ellie nodded, the weight of the paper in her hand like a stone. "What if we're too late?" Blind Bear smiled, a sad, knowing expression. "Then make them remember. With fire, if you must." They left Red Mesa under a blanket of stars. The trail twisted down through the darkness, Nantan riding ahead, a silent shadow. Ellie gripped her saddle horn, every word from Blind Bear echoing in her mind, every lie unraveling, every heartbeat a countdown to Sunday. They reached the ridge overlooking the mine at sunrise. Below, 2 guards sat lazily by a fire near the shaft entrance. A thin tendril of smoke rose from a side chimney. Someone was alive inside. Ellie's heart slammed against her ribs. Nantan lowered his spyglass. "They're in there. 3 of them. 2 boys, 1 girl." "Are they okay?" "Alive," he said, "but thin. The girl is limping." Ellie turned to him, her eyes blazing. "We go in now." "The tunnel's unstable," he cautioned. "If it's rigged, we have to find the blasting powder and disarm it before we move the children." She took a deep breath. "Then we go quiet, and we go smart." The plan was simple, desperate. Maria would ride in from the north, creating a diversion. Ellie and Nantan would slip in through a ventilation shaft Blind Bear had marked on their map. At high noon, as the sun beat down on the dry stone, they made their move. Maria's shot rang out, sharp and clean. 1 guard fell, the other scrambled for his rifle. Ellie and Nantan dropped into the mine's side tunnel. The air was thick, damp, and cold. They moved quickly, past rusted carts and broken tracks. Ellie found the blasting powder. 2 crates stacked near a sealed shaft, a coil of wire snaking towards a handmade detonator. Her hands shaking, she remembered the steps her father had taught her for fixing fence wire back in Missouri. Left tight, right loose. Don't pull till you're sure. The wire snapped. The detonator was dead. Nantan moved ahead. Then they heard it. A soft cry, a cough. They rounded a corner and saw them, 3 small children, huddled together under a ratty blanket. Their eyes widened with fear at the sight of Nantan, then with a flicker of hope when they saw Ellie. "We're here to get you out," she whispered. The smallest boy clung to her leg. The girl, her limp more pronounced now, nodded as if she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. They moved quickly, but not quickly enough. Gunfire erupted from outside, a shout, Maria's voice. "They're early," Ellie said, her voice sharp with alarm. "We have to go, now." Nantan scooped up the smallest boy. Ellie took the girl's hand. They burst out into the blinding sunlight, ducking behind a pile of rocks as bullets whizzed past their heads. Maria was down, but alive, bleeding from her shoulder. She held up her pistol with a weak grin. "Don't let the bastards win!" Nantan helped her onto a horse. Ellie clung to the girl as they galloped toward the canyon's edge. Behind them, the mine entrance exploded, not from their doing, but from a second, hidden fuse. The truth was almost buried again. Almost. "If he's willing to kill children," Nantan muttered, his voice a low growl. "What will he do when we come for him?" The wind howled through El Serpiente Gulch, a mournful, warning sound. The narrow canyon was a maze of jagged rocks and long, deceptive shadows. Every gust of wind sounded like a whispered threat. Ellie kept her eyes forward, her hand never straying far from the revolver at her hip. The silence was unnerving. Too easy. Nantan rode just ahead, his posture rigid. Maria, her teeth gritted against the pain from her wounded shoulder, rode beside the children, who were huddled together, their small faces pale with exhaustion and fear. They had bought themselves some time, but the partial collapse of the mine had only made their hunters more desperate. "We're being followed," Nantan said, his voice flat. Ellie tensed. "How many?" "At least 4 horses. Maybe more." "We won't make it out of the canyon before they catch us," Maria said, her voice strained. "There's a drop-off up ahead," Nantan said. "An old trail splits into 3. If we can hold them there, you can get the children to safety." Maria snorted, a trickle of blood on her lips. "You're assuming I can ride another hour with a hole in my shoulder." "You'll do it," Ellie said, already shifting the children onto Maria's horse. "We're not losing them now." They reached the fork in the trail just as the first hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls behind them. Nantan was off his horse in an instant, taking cover behind a cluster of boulders. Ellie dropped down beside him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. A mocking whistle cut through the silence. A bullet ricocheted off a rock just inches from her head. "You sure about this?" she hissed. "No," Nantan muttered, "but sometimes you don't get sure. You just get ready." 5 riders appeared, silhouetted against the sky. And at their center, a snake-like grin on his face, was Jed Rattles McKinnon. He hadn't died under that horse after all. "Well, well," he called out, his voice dripping with malice. "The school marm, the savage, and the straggler sister. Looks like we got ourselves a reunion." Ellie rose from behind the rocks, her pistol aimed squarely at his chest. "This ends here, Rattles. We have enough to hang Blackthorn and you right beside him." He laughed, a slow, ugly sound. "You think any judge is going to take the word of a half-blood, a bleeding teacher, and a woman whose brother turned traitor? I'm the law out here, sweetheart. Me and the man who signs my checks." "Not anymore," Ellie said, pulling something from her coat. His spurs. The same spurs that had left their mark at the settler raid, at Nantan's village. His smile faltered. "You've been busy." "You left your name on every corpse you made," she said, her voice cold as ice. "And now I'm giving it back." Nantan fired first. The shot sent the man next to Rattles spinning out of his saddle. The canyon erupted in a deafening roar of gunfire and screaming horses. Ellie returned fire, hitting one man in the leg. Rattles charged straight through the chaos, his pistol raised. Nantan tackled him off his horse, and they rolled in the dirt, a brutal flurry of fists and curses. Rattles reached for his knife, but Ellie was there first, her boot pressing down hard on his wrist. "Try it," she said. The barrel of her gun pointed between his eyes. He grinned, blood trickling from his split lip. "You don't have the stomach for it, girl." "You've never seen what a mother looks like when she finds her child missing," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You think I don't have the stomach?" Nantan stood, his knuckles scraped raw. "We don't kill him." Rattles laughed through the blood. "You should." "No," Ellie said. "We let him rot in a real cell, in front of real people. They bound his hands with his own belt and threw him across a horse. By nightfall, they reached a safe ridge overlooking Dust Rock. Maria had taken the children to an abandoned stage depot. They were sleeping now, safe for the first time in days. "Did he talk?" Maria asked, nodding toward the bloodied, bound figure of Rattles. "Enough," Nantan said. "We know where they're meeting," Ellie added. "Blackthorn, Boone, and the last of his men. A parley. Tomorrow at Whitetail Pass." "He doesn't call meetings," Maria said, raising an eyebrow. "He sends bullets." "He wants to control the story," Ellie said. "He thinks we'll come alone, scared." "We'll come with the truth," Nantan said, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "With the children as witnesses, with Rattles in chains. But we'll need Boone." We need him to see who the real killer is. He won't trust me, Ellie said. He might trust the one man he's blamed his whole life, Nantan replied. Me. Ellie stared into the fire, 1,000 different scenarios playing out in her mind. 1,000 ways it could all go wrong. But then she saw the faces of the children, the way they flinched at every loud noise. That was reason enough. She stood and loaded a fresh round into her revolver. Then let's give Blackthorn the reckoning he never saw coming. Dawn broke cold and gray over Whitetail Pass. The ridgeline cut a sharp, jagged line against the sky. Ellie stood at the edge of the bluff, the wind biting at her skin. Below, in the valley, a small group was forming. 5 riders, a wagon, and at their center, a man dressed in black from head to toe, Cyrus Blackthorn. Even from this distance, his arrogance was a palpable thing. They brought Boone, Nantan said, his voice a low rumble. Ellie narrowed her eyes. The marshal's tan hat was unmistakable. He rode stiffly, like a man made of glass. That could be good, she said, or it could be a damn funeral. Maria joined them, her arm bound tightly. The children are safe, she said. The priest at the old mission agreed to hide them. No one gets in without the password. What is it? Ellie asked. Maria smiled faintly. Dust Rock Redemption. They rode down slowly, making sure they were visible, their hands in plain sight. Rattles was bound and gagged, roped to Nantan's saddle. As they approached, Blackthorn greeted them with a smile that was all teeth. Miss Harrow, he drawled, you've been quite the thorn in my side. Ellie dismounted, her eyes locked on his. I aim to be the bullet in your heart. Blackthorn chuckled. Now, Marshal Boone insisted we talk. Boone didn't speak. His jaw twitched, but his eyes were fixed on Nantan. Let's not waste time, Nantan said, stepping forward. You orchestrated every raid for the last 20 years. You hired men to wear Apache colors. You armed them. You lied to the settlers, to the law, to him. Blackthorn's smile didn't waver. That's quite an accusation, coming from a man whose people have started half the fires in this territory. Ellie pulled out the notebook, the spur, the signed order from McKinnon. She handed them to Boone. You want the truth, Marshal? She said, her voice flat. There it is, signed, sealed, and soaked in blood, yours included. Boone's hands trembled as he took the papers. He read the names, the dates, the chillingly casual orders. Then he looked up, his eyes wide with a dawning horror, and stared at Blackthorn. You told me it was them, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You said it was the Apache who killed Sarah, my boy. I said what needed to be said, Blackthorn snapped, his mask of civility finally cracking. You wanted someone to blame. I gave you justice. What difference does it make where the bullet came from? Boone's eyes hardened. Something inside him broke. Every damn difference, he whispered. He drew his gun. Not on Nantan, not on Ellie. He aimed it squarely at Blackthorn. The world held its breath. Blackthorn was faster. A gunshot cracked the silence. Boone staggered back, a dark red flower blooming on his chest. Ellie screamed, diving for cover as the world exploded into chaos. Nantan dragged Boone down, pressing a hand to the wound. Hold on, old man, he growled. Don't you dare quit on me now. Should have shot him 20 years ago, Boone coughed, blood staining his mustache. More riders appeared on the ridge. Blackthorn's men. The trap had sprung. Ellie pulled her pistol and fired, hitting one of the riders in the leg. Maria took out another with a clean shot to the chest. Nantan handed Ellie Boone's badge. Take it. What? You'll need it to end this. She stared at the tarnished star in her hand, cold and heavy with the weight of history. She rose to her feet, the badge in one hand, her pistol in the other. I'm the law now, Cyrus, she shouted, her voice ringing through the canyon. You want to keep lying? Then come face the truth in daylight. Rattles took his chance. He wriggled free of his bonds and lunged for a rifle in the dust. Ellie turned and shot him through the heart. He fell without a sound, his eyes wide with surprise. With Rattles down and Blackthorn bleeding from a gut shot delivered by Nantan, the rest of his men scattered like rats. By noon, only the wind remained. Boone died in Nantan's arms, his last breath a ragged sigh. Ellie stood over Blackthorn, who was clutching his stomach, his lifeblood seeping into the dirt. "You'll hang for this," she said. He laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "Maybe. But I still made more than God." "No," Ellie said quietly. "You just stole longer." They buried Boone on the ridge under a pile of stones. Then they rode back to Dust Rock carrying the truth and the badge. "The badge doesn't make you the law," Ellie whispered to herself, "but wearing it means you better act like it." Dust Rock looked different when you rode in with a badge on your chest and 2 bodies in a wagon. The townsfolk didn't cheer. They watched from behind twitching curtains, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. Ellie stopped in front of the courthouse and climbed the creaking steps. She held Boone's tarnished badge high for all to see. "People of Dust Rock," she called out, her voice clear and strong. "You've been lied to." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as doors creaked open. "For 20 years you were told to fear the Apache, to hate them. You were told they were the ones who burned your homes and slaughtered your friends." She stepped aside, revealing Blackthorn's wrapped body. "This is the man who gave the orders, the man who hired the killers, the man who built his fortune on your fear and your blood." Nantan stepped forward and threw down the evidence, the ledgers, the spurs, Caleb's notebook. "These are the facts," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Names, places, blood trails." The sheriff's deputy, a wiry man named Hodges, stepped forward. "So what now? We just believe you? Just change everything?" "No," Ellie said. She walked over to Boone's body and placed the badge on his chest. "You don't believe me. You believe the man you followed, the one who realized the truth too late and died trying to make it right. You believe the children who almost died in that mine? Or you let this all happen again?" Hodges swallowed, then gave a single decisive nod. "I'm not your marshal," Ellie said, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. "I'm a witness, and I'm not going anywhere until every person who paid for this blood has their name read aloud in a court of law." The crowd stirred, no longer just watching but listening, angry, awake. Later that night, in the quiet of the sheriff's office, Maria came to find her. "They're talking," she said. "About elections, about rebuilding." "Good," Ellie said, not looking up from the stacks of documents on Boone's old desk. "They're also scared." "So am I." "You did it, Ellie," Maria said softly. "You brought the truth home." Ellie shook her head. "The truth isn't home yet. It's just passing through, waiting to see if anyone has the courage to give it a place to stay." "And what about you? What are you waiting for?" Ellie looked out the window at the star-dusted sky. "I need to see Caleb." "Ellie, he was part of this." "I know, but he also tried to stop it. If he's alive, I need to hear it from him. And if he's dead, I need to know what kind of man my brother became before the end." Nantan entered, holding a torn scrap of canvas. Stitched on it was a crude mark she recognized instantly, Caleb's signature. "We found this near the northern ridge," he said. "Fresh tracks. Someone left in a hurry." Ellie stared at the scrap, her heart thudding. "Then we ride at dawn." The trail north was a jagged scar across the sun-bleached land. They found him in a half-burned shack, scribbling frantically in a notebook. He looked older, broken. "Ellie," he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You're alive." "So are you," she said, her voice tight. "Barely." "I didn't know how to tell you," he stammered. "After what I did, what I let them do." "You didn't do it, Caleb," she snapped. You watched. You knew. You let it happen. He flinched. I tried to stop it. I wrote it all down. You tried too late. There were children down there waiting to die. I know, he whispered, his eyes on the floor. I found your pages, she said, her voice softening slightly. I buried Blackthorn with your words in my hand, but you should have faced what you helped build, not run from it. I wasn't running, he said. I was surviving, trying to find a way to come back when it would matter. It always mattered, she said softly. Boone's dead, she told him. Blackthorn, too. The town is changing. People are listening now. So what do? He asked, his voice trembling. Walk back in and pretend I didn't wear the wrong badge? No, Nantan said from the doorway. You walk back in and testify. Every name, every deal, every lie. And after that? You live with it, Ellie said, like the rest of us. 1 week later, Ellie stood at Boone's grave. She placed a small hand-carved wooden bird on the simple marker. For Sarah, she whispered, and for you, when you finally saw. Maria joined her on the hill. A new circuit judge is coming, she said. They're reopening the courthouse. Real trials this time. About time, Ellie said. Are you staying on? Ellie looked out over the town. Children were playing in the street. Horses drank from the trough. For the first time in a long time, there were no gunshots, no smoke. For a while, she said. Long enough to make sure the truth has a roof over its head. You're a good lawman, Ellie. She shook her head. I'm not the law. I'm just someone who remembered what mercy feels like. She walked back down the hill, the wind at her back, the star pinned to her chest. Not as a symbol of power, but as a promise. To protect, to witness, to remember. Because the past wasn't dead. It was just soil. And now, finally, something honest could grow. If you enjoyed this story and want to see justice served in the darkest corners of the world, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You never know what secrets are buried just beneath the surface.